We just finished parting out a 2005 F350 6.0 diesel. Now this was a pretty rare truck. It's a two-door truck, long bed, four-wheel drive, but it's not a work truck. It was an XLT, two-tone truck, blue, all windows, power door locks. It was a nice truck. Problem, this truck spent most of its life up north. And this was an absolute mess to part this truck out. Countless bolts seized up, had to be cut off, things just literally ratchet strapped together. Now the interesting thing about this truck, there's actually two parts. One is the odometer said it had 59,000 miles on it, which is why I bought it. But the rest of the truck did not look like a truck with 59,000 miles on it. Researched the speedometer. The speedometer looks like it was the original one. So it really creates more questions than it does answers. The second thing is this truck had some theft history. The case has been closed, and obviously the truck has been found, and then they ran it through auction, and then now that's why I have it. If I had known how rusty it was, I probably wouldn't have bought it. The low mileage is what grabbed my attention. From the pictures, you couldn't tell the truck was in that bad of condition. But once we got it here, it's bad. So I want to show you guys what happens when a Super Duty spends most of its life up north, and really how it just literally eats this truck from the ground up. So let's take a look. Now that the body's off, we can get a closer look at this right front frame rail. And as you can see, it looks like part of it maybe has been cut. The other part maybe has been ripped off. You can also see back in there a lot of rust. Now this bracket that's here on the side of the frame is not a factory Ford bracket. So it makes me again think that this maybe has some sort of accessory on the front, possibly a snowplow. And as we move down the passenger side, the first thing I want to point out is these coil spring buckets are extremely strong. In fact, they hold the weight of that diesel engine. But rust likes to attack these top area of this coil spring bucket. I've even seen some trucks where the coil spring will actually be pushed through the coil spring bucket. This truck is not far from having that happen. You can see the scaling, the pitting. So far gone that this rubber dampener that normally just falls off once the coil spring's removed is stuck and molded into the upper part of this coil spring bucket. Possibly could have been what was supporting a lot of the weight. Give you a shot of the back side here. And you can see the scaling. Which definitely has made this a lot weaker than what it was when new. So let's move across the engine cradle here. And this truck had a lot of oil leaks, which again, I'm not sure why it would have so many oil leaks with such a low mileage engine. But that oil leaks is probably what has saved this engine cradle here, engine cross member. You can see this is still shiny metal. So oil does protect these frames. This right front frame rail, we can get a closer look at that bracket here that's been trimmed that we saw in the pictures when the truck was complete. Now this left frame rail is in pretty good shape, including the coil spring bucket is in much better shape than the other side. This one actually would be usable if we wanted to put it on another truck. Again, mostly because there were some oil leaks over here. You got your power steering pump, hydro booster, and then as well potentially some engine oil leaks. But most of this is probably due to something in the power steering system. But we don't know. But you can see it was leaking oil. Now as we move on back, this is where kind of the rust begins. The control arm and radius arm bracket got a little bit of surface rust, but it's not too bad. As we move on back, this is your rear cab bushing. In between those two cab bushings is your first frame cross member on these two-door trucks, and this would hold your front fuel tank. And as you can see where the fuel tank would mount, there's a big hole. This fuel tank was held on by ratchet straps, and that's the reason why. Changing these frame cross members is possible. It's not easy, but obviously the owner of this truck did not want to do that. As we move on back, this is a bed bolt. The bed was so rotten that for this particular bed bolt, the bed just pulled loose actually from the bolt. when we started lifting the bed. Then we're moving back to the front spring hanger, and it's not in too bad a shape. These are pretty solid pieces. They get rinsed from just the spray from the tires, and usually don't rust that bad. But when we move over here to the rear fuel tank frame cross member, we can see more of the same. Again, this is metal, just flaking off. This bolt that holds the skid plate on, the threads are completely gone. You're definitely not going to get that bolt out. And here is the ratchet strap that was holding the fuel tank on. I don't know if I can get it off. So that was what was holding the fuel tank on. Real safe. So as we move on back, you can see the rust is getting worse. That's what's left of the second bed bolt. You see how thin it is? Rust has ate it almost in two. The overload spring bump stop is gone. Another bed bolt. This is your rear shock bracket. You can just see the rust down in there. This is top of your overload spring bracket. You see rust. It's just caked with mud and metal flakes. Then we move on back to the rear spring hanger. Now, a common problem with these rusted trucks is the spring hanger bolt will seize to the metal sleeve that's inside this rubber bushing. And I think this truck is going to be that way. We tried to get it off earlier and it was not coming. Probably going to have to end up cutting that off. It's not going to be fun. Back here, we cut a bed bolt off. Cut the head partially off, and then the floor of the bed was so bad that the bed just literally lifted up off of there. Now the hitch for the trailer is actually in pretty good shape. And I don't know why that is. We hardly ever see one of these hitches that is in poor condition. So maybe this one isn't original, or maybe they put a different type of paint on it or coating that prevents rust. So the next thing we're going to look at is the rearmost frame cross members. Now in the 99 through 04 Super Duties, non-cab chassis, this whole cross member assembly is one piece. But on the 05 through 7 Super Duties non-cab chassis, they made this into three pieces. So you have a rearmost cross member and then a forward one that goes right behind the rear axle. And connecting those is a bolt-in plate that holds the spare tire carrier. And as you can see, the spare tire carrier is completely seized up. Cable's cut, which is probably because they couldn't get this lower, had to cut it. Surprisingly, the bolts came out, but you're definitely not going to be using this spare tire carrier. It's scrap metal. As we move on down the right side, you see more of the bed bolts still there. This bump stop did survive, but it is about to fall off. You can see it cracking there. Again, more flaking. Now some of these frames can get pretty weak. We've never seen one actually break, but a few more years of service and this one would have had some issues. If you've ever seen one of these Super Duties going down the highway and the bed no longer lines up with cab, or at least the body lines no longer line up, that is because the floor of the bed floor cross members, or a mixture of the two, have rusted out. In fact, as we walked around, you've probably seen a lot of this debris and dirt on the floor. This is the metal from the truck that has just fell off the truck from the vibrations of us using air tools, hammering, and just a normal process of taking a truck apart. I bet there's probably 10 or 15 pounds of metal down there. In fact, I just mentioned that bed floor cross member. Those two pieces right there are part of the bed floor cross member that just fell off. There's another piece over there. So this bed wasn't too far gone, or too far from falling in on itself. But again, Super Duties, extremely strong trucks, tough trucks, can handle a lot. But like most vehicles, when they're exposed to the salt and the elements from up north, it eventually gets them. It's really is amazing how it can deteriorate a truck in a matter of a short period of time. All right, so that concludes the walk around of this rusted out, low mileage Superduty. Hey, if you like what you see here on the channel, please like, please subscribe, please share, and we'll keep this stuff coming. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time.